Hello, Ken Spriggs here with my live stream for my reveal of my 2001 Discovery. Pardon the loud train whistle in the back. Where I live, there are two major train tracks within about 2 miles of me. And there's always, at least about 2 or 3 times a day, there are trains going by. And it's funny because every time I try to film a video, there's a train that interrupts it. I always have to kind of pause and come back. Or also I live near a hospital, which I work for. And so there's always ambulance and sirens and pretty noisy around here. So pardon the noise from that. Let me go ahead and hold on a second. Let me switch this around. All right, I want to get this set up on my iPad so I can see any chat. There we go. Hey, hi there, glue and paper guy. No, you cannot have this command module for your birthday. I'm sorry. It's already taken for. It's already paid for. Hey, Scott, how you doing? All right, and there's the beauty up there on the wall. I took down my original one temporarily so that I could put this up and get a better display of it. Now I am going to be doing another short video probably tomorrow where I'll do some video of the ship and some stills, some close-up beauty shots, just to put that out there in a video. Just because the live stream isn't necessarily very good quality or the best quality that you can get. But this will be saved as well. Hey Kevin, how you doing? Hey Scale Modder Eric, thank you. Thanks Tom. I'm going to get up here in a moment and take some closer shots of it. Definitely very happy with how this turned out, and I think it's far superior to my original build, and that's to be expected. I built my original one I think over 3 years ago, and certainly my skills have increased since then and have gotten better, especially with this ship. And it helps too when you build more than one of them. That certainly gives you more skill on it and figure out the issues that you have. So let me go over a few things. Now, when I built the pod bay, I did that early on, and I built the green strawberry version. And it's a good kit. Don't get me wrong. It's a real good kit. But I didn't really like their pod bay. I'm sorry, not their pod bay, their cockpit, because it was very small. It really wasn't the right proportions, and it was all photo etch. The pod bay was all resin with some photo etch additions. So then in November, Stargazer, well, actually Starship Modeler finally cast and released the Stargazer version, which let me show you here real quick. That's the Stargazer version, which for my money, that's the best one you can possibly get. Now, it's not available anymore, unfortunately, because Starship Modeler, for some reason, well, first they waited 3 years to make the thing because they had the molds back before the actual kit was made from Mobius. For whatever reason, they never got around to it, and they hung on to it, and then finally last November, they finally produced it. So I got a hold of it, and it's really, really nice. It's all resin. I ended up buying 2 of them. One of them I used the cockpit for, obviously, and I also used a few other parts from that particular one. But I still have a full kit of the Stargazer, which really, really, really good, really well done. model to go inside. But I didn't know until November that it was coming out. I had actually corresponded a couple of times with Ian Walsh, who is the owner and creator of Stargazer, and he lamented the fact that Starship Modeler just didn't produce it, and it lost money for him, and he wasn't real happy. But he's the one that came on instead that they were releasing it, so I was real happy to see that happen, and finally come out, and I was glad to be able to put that into this kit because it's a much nicer cockpit. So yeah, nobody's gonna take it, Kevin, over my dead body. Oh yeah, the video. So what I'm doing is, I have a couple tripods. The one I'm holding in my hand is a little smaller, and I have my phone on a tripod, and so it's a lot easier to keep it steady when it's a longer kind of a boom sort of thing. So it's not a problem. And yeah, Scott Philippi in the chat there. He's actually my neighbor. So he gets the benefit of seeing a lot of my models firsthand and up close, and seeing how they look in real life. So yeah, that's why he said that the video doesn't do it any justice, and that is true. When you get this, Kevin, you're going to see definitely it looks a lot better. Anything like that looks a lot better in real life, especially the lights, because inside the pod bay and the cockpit, there's all different color lights, different brightnesses of lights. The camera just doesn't know how to focus. It doesn't know what to look at. If it was all one color, just all white or maybe all red or something, it might have a better time, but it has a hard time focusing, and so the yellows look too bright, the reds and blues look washed out, things like that. So it's a little more, it definitely looks better in real life. So now I like to make, as far as the pod bay, from what when you look in the movie, that is really bright. When the pod bay doors open up, like right now, I have it positioned where I have the pod coming out of the front. So the first time we see that happen, it's really bright behind it. And I know that was a model, that was like a 50-foot model that they made, and reproduced the pod bay inside, which is really cool. What I would say, Tom, if they start making the Stargazer again, I would get that for sure. But I like the green strawberry. Green strawberry is still available. Their pod bay is excellent. It's really well done. They have some really cool parts of it. Now, if you want to light up certain things like the Athena room or the maintenance corridor, you're going to have to do some modification, cut some of the resin away to do that. Now, one of the things I loved about the green strawberry is for the maintenance corridor, they made photo etch for all the detail that lines it. And so I didn't use their part. They just had two halves that were resin that you put the photo etch into. I just used clear styrene. And the beauty of it was that the photo etch is metal, of course, and so all the areas that needed to have lights coming through were open. And so all I had to do was cut some strips of clear styrene to make the octagonal shape. And before I even put it, folded it up, I just put on the photo etch, and it was beautiful because it blocked the areas that didn't need to come through. And I even painted it white first so I could just stick it in there and put on, the decals and things like that. So yeah, I would recommend the green strawberry for sure. I wouldn't recommend their cockpit because it's not very accurate. If I were to do that, I would use the Paragraphics cockpit. My very first build, I used Paragraphics cockpit and the pod bay, and I had to do a lot of modification, obviously, since it was just photo etch. But Paragraphics is a nice set as well too. But you can get the green strawberry for not that much more, if even less than the pair graphics. So they actually have 3 sets. They have the pod bay, the cockpit, and then they have a set that is some pods. I ended up getting all 3 of them. They have what's called a fruit pack where you can get all 3 together. And their pods are just solid resin, so I didn't use those. But they had some really nice decal sets, and they had some photo etch arms for the pods, which were nice. So I ended up using those in order to decorate the pods. The pods themselves I got from Shapeways, from a designer called Falconware, and they're just amazing. The one that's coming out right now, it lights up for the headlights, but it doesn't have any kind of a cockpit. The one that I made to go on the outside of the ship, I'll show you that here. And I'm not going to put that on tonight because you have to take the sphere off in order to get in there and put this in. But here's the pod with Frank in the arms. And there's an aluminum tube that I painted black. Here's the wires. And then this connects on the port side of the ship. There's a hole that goes through for the wiring, and then there's holes for these 4 brass tubes to go through. And then this lights up. And not only do the headlights light up, but the cockpit lights up. There's a little day figure inside of it. The controls light up. It's pretty amazing. And this was also from Falconware on Shapeways. So, and there's the decals that I was talking about on the back, which are pretty cool. Yeah, so if you get any pods at all for this ship, the only one I would recommend would be from Falconware on Shapeways, because they're just incredible. They're absolutely astounding. And there's multiple versions. I mean, you can get ones that just have the headlights channeled out. You can get one with the full interior. You can get one that has the back opened up if you wanted to reproduce Dave popping out into the airlock, if you were so inclined. So it's pretty sweet. You could definitely do a lot of things with it. And he's put a lot of work into them, and they're really well designed as far as that. So, all right. One more thing I want to show you. Here's my zero gravity toilet instructions in case you want to go over those if you're going to be riding on the Ares 1B anytime soon. It's from my friend Tim Striner, who I was just talking to him today. He made a set for Augie Gonzalez, and he sent them out, and they got lost. FedEx, being the crappy service that they are, lost them, and he never got them. So he made another set, and he's making yours as well. So he's working on it, getting it done. We just talked today. He's on here. That's the glue and paper guy. He does. He likes building the paper models. We're going to be coming up after this, we're going to work on a buddy build, and we're going to make a version of the ATST. He's doing a paper version, and I'm doing the Bandai kit, the larger version, and do a little diorama with it. There you go. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. I really like it. I think it really goes well with my 2001 display. And it actually has all the words. I don't know. I don't think these are the accurate words, I think Tim said, but they're pretty funny. Because, I mean, they make sense. They're logical. If you read them, they make sense. But, good God, there's 10 steps to it. I wouldn't need to go to the bathroom after that. I would have had a problem. If you can read 10 steps to use a zero gravity toilet. But I thought that was funny. So, yeah, I really like that a lot. And that goes nicely on my 2001 wall to augment that. And I have it stuck up with some removable hangers, like adhesive or Velcro hangers, so I can always move it. Because my next big ship is going to either be the Ares 1B when that comes out, the big one, or the big Space Clipper, which I'm real excited to get to. So those are going to go somewhere on this wall right here. I'm real excited about both of those kits because they're going to be pretty sweet with the full interiors and, you know, much larger versions. So real happy with that. Now, if they would just bring out a larger, accurate scale moon bus, I would be thrilled as punch. That would be like the last thing I can see that I really want to get from them and build. Or well, actually, Space Station 5 would be nice too. So, yeah, it actually is. I was reading some of it. It kind of makes sense. Like, I know that there really are anti-gravity toilets up in space, and they have to be careful how they do it. Yeah, that's still available, Kevin. I had thought of it. The only downside is that it's got some really, most of it is just solid resin pieces and a lot of photo etch that you have to do. I think a plastic model kit would be fantastic, and I would really love to see them do that because that would be an iconic property for them to do for sure with this. So, but we'll see. Still hoping to get the Ares 1B and the Space Clipper hopefully by the end of the year, but we'll see. If not the end of the year, early next year. I know the last post I saw from Cult TV Man said that they were still hoping by the end of the year, but possibly next year, so we don't have an exact time frame, but hopefully not too much further in the future. It might be my Christmas present to myself. That would be awesome. So, all right. So, let me go ahead and get this lit up. So now I have I have a remote control sensor. Sorry for the shadow. It's in the collar of the dome, right at the bottom, and it's hidden in so you don't see it at all. But it reaches very well with the remote control that I got from Evan Designs. So I just point it in that area, turn it on, and there it goes. Let me get on up there. I have to get up on a chair because it's up pretty high. But there we go. I think that's still my all-time favorite shot. And then if you put the door on this side, that's the first thing we see from the front of it. I mean, we see the ship from the behind and, you know, moving, but the first time we see this is when the front door opens up, the middle door, and the pod comes out for the first time. Yeah, I know they're still working on it. It's up in the air only because of the shipping parts, since they're getting it done over in China and coming over. So we'll see. But if it is next year, hopefully not too late next year. But there you go. So there's the front on shot. Let's take a look at the cockpit. So you got your little Frank figure sitting in there in his yellow spacesuit. You can make out the controls, and they change colors. I have two color changing SMDs hooked up to fiber optics. So they look fairly random when they flicker. It's pretty cool. You got your slightly light blue. It doesn't look quite as blue in real life, but it's like a lighter blue in the front, which looks like from the shots that I've seen. You've got your white hallway in the back. And you got your, see if I can get that to get closer. Yeah, it's going to wash out a bit, obviously, but you got your ceiling lights in the back hallway. All right, and then you got your pod bay, and there's a figure of Frank in his red spacesuit wearing his green helmet. Because I had asked Kevin, in my original one, I put Frank in his full red suit, and I put him in the maintenance corridor for that iconic scene. He suggested he'd rather have him in the pod bay, so I said, well, what if we make him with his green helmet? So he's just coming back in again to go up and disconnect Hal. Dave, what do you think you're doing? I think I'm entitled to an answer, Dave. No, Hal, I don't think you are entitled to an answer. You locked me out and you killed the crew. You get no answer. You get disconnected. And there's the maintenance corridor. And again, the maintenance corridor isn't yellow. It's a warm white. So it doesn't really look like that in real life. It's more of a blended look. Well, Hal did get back up again in the second movie, so he was okay. He ended up being good. And then there's the workbench, and the display on that is also changing colors. The color changing display. And a little red Hal next to it. I'll take this out in a moment and show you that straight on. So now the beauty of this is that the pod is removable. And I wired it up so that the wires go attached to these two brass rods. And then inside the ship, I have square brass rods in the middle and also on the left side. And those are wired to power. So when I plug this in and it makes contact, it lights up an SMD that's underneath this pod, and it lights up fiber optics in the pod that light up the headlights. So this can go in the center, this can go in the left side, and it lights up in both of them. Or you can take it out entirely if you don't want it in either one. And there's also a pod platform with no pod on it that can be put into either side as well. So you can switch it off. And both doors here are able to be put on. They just press fit on, and they're removable so that he can also display it with the pod coming out of the side and facing it off, put the doors on, and then display it that way. Or he can leave that off and just display it with the pod coming out of either one of these. So you got some options that are pretty cool. Give you some options on what you want to do. So let's go ahead and take a look straight on in. There we go. And there's the little red Hal you can see. There's the workbench changing colors. Try to get that to focus. Come on. There's the stationary pod. Yes, the doors just pop on from the outside. There's the Athena room back there, changing colors as well. You got your 6 displays. Those also, sorry for the shakiness, those also have 2 different color changing SMDs behind them so that they give a random look. Like it looks like sometimes they're all the same color, but for the most part, like you can see there's red, and then there's purple, and that turns into some green and some orange, and it gives it a much more realistic look. There we go. It even looks like there's something going on them. I mean, there's no text, of course. And then you got that door coming through, and I have the ladder that you can see is lit up. So you can make that out. The little control right there for the door is lit up with red. And of course, all the ceiling lights are lit up. There's the maintenance corridor back there. There's the spacesuit. So I tried to reproduce how it looked when Dave left the ship. So you got the blue spacesuit over to the right. The yellow one's gone because Frank is wearing it. And you got just the red helmet that Dave forgot, which he walked by. I always thought it was kind of funny when he comes in and he walks by. He walks right by the helmet, and the camera focuses on it. I always imagined that he was looking up and saying, "Damn it, that stupid helmet. Why did I forget it? All that training I had. How in the world did I leave the spaceship without my helmet?" I'll bet that didn't go into his log at all. He didn't tell anybody. Yeah, I couldn't get in, so I just went in through the airlock. Yeah, no trouble, because I had my helmet. It was great. Yeah. So very, very beautiful. I like when you get further away, it looks a little more like a slightly bluish look. It's not quite as blue as that in real life. But yeah, it looks like the movie lighting because it gives it more of that look. All right. Yeah, so the command sphere connects with magnets. The propulsion unit connects with magnets. Now, right now, the two halves of the cargo modules are not together. Well, I'm glad there is no sag. It's mostly because of these brackets. These are 3D printed brackets that I got off of Thingiverse. And they're nice because they have like a little hook, and so they hook the spine. They basically support the spine because everything else hooks onto the spine, so it doesn't have to be supporting the command sphere or the propulsion unit. So right now I don't have the center spine glued together. They're just pushed together. So when you get the model, it'll be easier to ship that way. So when you get the model, Kevin, what you'll have to do first is glue the two halves of the spine together. And we'll get together over the phone or do a little Skype before then so I can go over some of the things with you. You'll just glue the two halves of the spine together. In the front, there are wires that feed into the command sphere to plug in the power because the batteries are in the back. And no, they're not. They're actually 3D printed. And they're real cool because they work great. I mean, they just hook right into the ship, and I paint in the black so when you're at a distance, they just blend into the space background. Yeah, and so all you're going to do is glue that together, bring the wires in, plug in the power, and of course you'll take the top of the sphere off. That comes off as well with magnets. And you'll plug in the command sphere. Well, actually, I will have it connected already. If you want to put the side pod, the pod coming out, it's pretty easy. You just fish the wire through a hole. There's some pins it slides in, and it sits in there firmly. There's a connect. You just plug in the connect, and it's ready to go. Put the top of the sphere back on, and you're ready to go. So that's pretty easy to do. So depending on how you want to display it, if you want to display it with that on a regular basis, or if you want to display it with the other pods, it's probably not going to look the best if you have the pod coming out of the ship and the pod facing it off. It's not going to look real natural. We're going to be kind of close to each other. It's not going to look like it's supposed to look. Let's take a few looks at it here. Yes, the pod bay and the cockpit are both glued into the ship, into the sphere. So they're not moving. There's a little bit of space behind it, not a ton, but there's enough room obviously back there for the wiring so you can get it in. I'll put some labels on the wires. You really can't mix them up because, let me show you real quick here. So the connectors come with, you have like this one. Sorry. This one is the female end. Obviously the other side is the male end, has two pins sticking out. So those just click together. They're not real tight. They click together nicely, but then you can easily pull them apart. So the way it's designed is that the wires coming from the power into this sphere are female ends. So, but the wires coming down from the cockpit are male ends. So you can't mix them up because they wouldn't work, obviously. So Actually, it's probably reversed. But anyway, there's no way to mix them up, and I'll label them so you'll know. You'll know which ones to plug in. And then the back, the collar right in front of the propulsion unit pulls off with magnets. And there's a lot of play. The whole tube comes out, the metal steel tube, and then the battery compartment, the AA batteries come out entirely, and then you just change them. And there's a switch. And I had mentioned in my video too that with the remote control, if you leave the power turned on for the batteries, it will slowly leach out the power and they'll die in a couple weeks if it's not turned on. I mean, if you turned it on, you'll get a couple of days out of it, but you're not going to get, it's not the kind of thing you can leave turned on all the time because it'll kill the batteries in a couple of days. I've had my original one at Wonderfest, obviously for like 2 days while it was on the display. And by the end of the 2 days, it was starting to get dim, so the batteries were starting to die. Yeah, so you can either just take the propulsion unit off, turn the battery off, or just take them out, whichever. Or just leave them in. Yeah, if you leave them in and turn it off, then you don't have to worry about it. But it takes some time for those to die anyway. And then also, too, if you get some better batteries like Duracell or some of the nicer ones, they'll last a lot longer. I'm just using some cheap dollar store ones, so they don't last as much. So, and there's the engines, which I kind of made them look a little blackened in some areas. And there's the propulsion unit. So I added some additional wiring detail to it. Plus with the painting from Aztec Dummy, it gives it a nice, realistic look with all the detailing on it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy with the Aztec, the Aztec Dummy masking set. If you're going to build this model, that's a must to have. I mean, it takes a little while. You have to get used to it and do it, but the key to it is that you have some stark colors and then you do a blending coat, and so it blends them in, but there's still distinct panels that you can see, especially on like the command sphere, on the propulsion unit, and even on the spine. So when you look at it far away, it just looks like it's light gray. When you get in closer, you can make out distinct panels, which make it look a lot more realistic. I was looking over the instructions and reading what they were suggesting, and they were saying that the original studio model, they basically painted it white, and then they went back over and they put a bunch of different gray panels on it. And a lot of the effects they achieved were with different bright lights, really bright studio lights, so they could get shadows and pick up the detail and things like that. But they didn't use any weathering. So unlike, like Star Trek ships, this ship isn't beat up. It was a brand new spaceship they just built for this purpose, and they built it and launched it. Now it was in space for 6 months, so you're going to have some, some dirt built up or things like that. But it's not weathered, so you wouldn't really weather this. It wouldn't look right trying to do that. Yeah, and that's the thing, Tim, is that your inclinations are to say, oh, that's not going to work. That's too dark. It's not going to be the way it ought to be. But it works great. I mean, Lou Dalmasso, who made this and then filmed the video, and he's done this effect other times with other things. I mean, he's a master painter. He's fantastic. He's definitely incredible in what he does. And he created the masks for this. I'm really hoping he creates masks, and he probably will, for the Ares 1B, because you got to have masks for that. That's got to have the different gray panels as well. And also for the for the larger space clipper. That would be great too, because that ship really does have different color panels, and putting those panels on really gives it a sense of scale. It makes it look a lot larger than it actually is. But yeah, he gives some great instructions. He gives tons of masks that you can use. And you can even go back and watch his video when he produced the masks a couple years ago, and see the process that he does. But the trick to it is, my first model I put too much of a blending coat, and it obscured a lot of the panels. I mean, they're not terrible. I have it sitting down here on my shelf. So there's my original one. So not bad. But when you get close, you're not seeing as distinct. I mean, it's not bad at all, but this time around, when I reached a certain point and I thought, oh, I don't know, it's still looking kind of, making our panels, I just stopped and just waited, let it go, and came back to it later and just kind of let it settle. And then when I looked at it, I thought, no, I'm gonna leave it as it is, because I want to see that detail, especially the propulsion unit. You get in close, there's a ton of detail. And that really gives you the impression that there's a lot more going on that propulsion unit than there actually is. I mean, obviously this model isn't accurate as far as the propulsion unit details by any means, but when you add on the different paints, it brings it out, and it adds a big effect on it. So all right, so we start the movie and we've got maybe a little closer. Yeah, there you go. Now, I can't say for sure, but I think the Discovery was the first spaceship to do the long crawl that obviously later on Star Wars developed. Since that came out in '68, Star Wars wasn't until '77. Yeah. Actually, it was a very subdued music. It wasn't like their big orchestra music. It was something really subdued. And we're just slowly watching the Discovery move by us and come into frame. Now yeah, Kevin. Now the antenna is movable. Let me get up there and I'll show you. And if I miss one of your comments, I'll go back and check in a moment, because they come up one at a time on my phone, which I'm viewing. So, okay. So I made it so that it rotates and it goes up and down. And right now, this isn't glued in place where it is right there. So it's removable. I won't take it off now, but this will be removed for shipping. But it's pretty easy to do. If you want to glue it in, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But you just glue the cylindrical part. It just glues down into this piece. This piece is attached on the bottom, and it rotates. And then the whole antenna sticks down onto that. But I'll take that off for shipping and make sure that that's protected. Now the spine is going to have to be folded in half, and there's a wire going between it, which I can't remove. So Just want to be careful with that because it's a thin magnet wire. Same with the wires inside the cockpit or the pod, the command sphere. Just be cautious when you go in there. You don't want to pull something loose because they had to be thinner in order to fit in that tight space, but they're strong enough. They're not that flimsy, but just be cautious when you plug it in. I wouldn't be taking it apart very often if you don't have to. You know, obviously put it up there and display it. And if you want to change how you display it, then you can do that then. All right, so let me show you. So here's one of the pod doors. It's just white on the inside. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably just mark on the inside because you're not going to see it. One of them is for the center, one's for the left side. And they would probably be okay to switch them, but they're going to fit better because when I build them, put it together, that's how I made them. So I know which one is which, but I'll just be sure to mark it so you'll be able to see when you get that. All right, so they're just pressure fit because they've got this nice lip on it. So that clicks in pretty well. So all you're going to do is line it up. Press it in. That's it. Pretty straightforward. And of course, this one does the same thing. I did put a little piece of metal inside of it, and sometimes a magnet works to get it out. Sometimes it doesn't. If not, all I would do is take like maybe a thin piece of styrene sheet or something with a point on it. Something that isn't going to damage it. Just lightly put it in the edge and it'll pop free. It'll come off for you. So that's not a problem. And once you get the one out, then you just put your hand in, pop it off. And it comes off. The one on the right side is glued in place because there's no reason. We never see that pod ever leave the ship. We never see that door ever open, so I just glued that in place so it's permanent. But I painted it and I put the decals on it, and it doesn't light up, obviously. One thing I'm really proud of, which I messed up on my first one, is this little bit right here. Because that's a part of the actual model or the ship on the movie. It may not be exact, but you have like those little bits coming down that are showing some detail in panels, which I always thought was cool. The rest of it, I didn't really follow any screenshots to go with different shades of panels. I just made it look interesting enough and tried to keep them somewhat random so you wouldn't have the same look all the time. I don't know if I can get back here and show you, but there we go. There's the airlock door, which that's from the Stargazer kit, which is really cool. So are the doors. These are not the original doors that came with the kit. These are resin. These are cast resin. Beautiful. Which is great. Oh, and he gave the bezels too, those ridged bezels, which was one of the biggest complaints I had about the Mobius kit, is that the doors and the bezels are all one piece, which is really stupid. Why would you do that? Because if you wanted it open, you're not going to have it open without the bezel. That's just really dumb. So those are part of the resin, and the door is inset, and so basically all I had to do was cut out where the door part was and just glue that in from the inside and paint it. It's got some photo etch controls on either side. It's hard to see from here, but unfortunately you're not going to see that because that'll be on the port side. That'll be away. You'll be displaying it like this. So pretty straightforward. And actually right now, even as we speak, I am 3D printing Kevin had asked about making a 2001 platform to put in front of this. So I tried my hand at some 3D design, and this will be my very first thing that I myself have designed in a 3D program and then printed. And basically it's going to be the monolith, and it has the how eye, like the domed how eye in the middle of it, and it's going to say 2001 A Space Odyssey at the top, and then underneath the how it says Discovery XD-1. So pretty cool. I'm printing it right now. It's about a 17-hour print because of how tall it is. And I even had to angle it down a bit because originally it was like 23 hours. So it'll finish sometime tomorrow morning about 9 o'clock. And hopefully it works out. The first one I'm doing is in clear resin because I had some still. And what I'd like to do is see if I can light up the how on the front of it. Obviously paint the whole thing black, and then put, and there's another train, a second train. I'm just used to them, but obviously whenever I'm filming, it always happens. There's always a train. There's so many every day that go by. It's kind of funny. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm really happy. I mean, one of the main reasons I built this a second time, because Kevin and I have talked about this. We've been talking about it since I built my first one, and I put it out on Facebook, and he saw it, and he was really impressed by it. So he had asked me about 3 years ago about building one, and we just kind of talked about it, and it didn't really go anywhere. And then more recently, early last year, he talked about it again, and we discussed some things. And so the main reason I wanted to build it again is because when I built the first one, they had not yet released these nicer interiors like the green strawberry, the better pods, which came later from Shapeways, and then obviously the Stargazer, which came out last November. So I really wanted to build this again and do a nicer job on it, especially with the interior. So I'm much more pleased with the interior on this one than I was with my original. I like my original, and certainly that's, my pride and joy. But by all means, this one is far superior in every way, which is to be expected. And I know other people. I've seen other people on different YouTube channels. I watch a lot of modelers on there, and some people will do that. They'll just say, hey, I'm going to go back. I built this 3 years ago. I'm not thrilled with what I did. I'm going to go ahead and do it again. I've even seen some people take and strip down models, sit and take them apart and take the paint off and do it again. But I don't think I would do that so much. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad to have built this again. Now, I don't want to build this again probably ever. It's just, and I love it. I love the model. I love the ship, obviously, but it's time intensive. My first one took 6 months to build. This one, it took a year, but only because, and Kevin understood, I wasn't building it straight. There was a good period of time. Yeah, and improved skills, absolutely. So 3 years later, I've definitely honed my skills to become better at it. One of the skills I really learned a lot better from my first build is how to airbrush. Using this masking set, airbrushing, and doing all the things you have to do really gets you improved on airbrushing, and then going even further with it and doing other models. And certainly by the time I got to this one, then obviously it was a lot easier for me to learn from past mistakes and be able to do a good job with the airbrushing and get it done. So, but last year in November, when I got my Saturn, I started printing some things, and Kevin wanted me to print some things. And so that definitely put some things on hold for a bit when I was doing my Ahsoka Tano and my Mandalorian figures. So I'll consider it, Kevin, that's for sure. I mean, no set time frame on that, but I would like to build that. I've never built the Enterprise, the 1350s. I've never built those before. So, in fact, somebody just asked me yesterday, somebody saw my post of this ship and he came on and said, hey, do you build the Enterprise 1350? And, I probably at some point will do it for you, Kevin, but I'm not wanting to do commission builds as a regular thing. Mainly because at that point, it's a job. It becomes a job. And I do this for a hobby. I do it because it's my passion. I like doing it. So if there's some benefit and some reason for me to do it, like something I've never done before, then I might consider it. But it just, you reach a point where you just feel compelled and you're like, I got to get on that. I got to work on that. I got to do it. I got to do it. But you want to build other things. So, I mean, obviously, earlier this year, I was working on some other major kits that I wanted to take to Wonderfest. And so this got put on hold a few times and things like that. So I don't mind doing commissions occasionally. I mean, by all means, Kevin and I agreed on a price and I was fine with that, but I didn't make any money doing this, I'll tell you that. But I enjoyed it and I got some more experience and I certainly got to build a better version of this than I did on the first one, which I was happy with. So that's kind of the thing. The one thing I would never really want to do is to just keep building the same spaceship over and over again for people. Like I know some people out there, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, the one guy, but he was a pro at building the Jupiter 2s, the Polar Lights versions. And he did a fantastic job. I mean, it was just beautiful. He's really, really good at it. And he would build them over and over. And it's like, I can't imagine anything that would kill a modeler's mojo more than building the same model over and over again. I mean, you'd get really good at it, but if it was something complex, I would not want to be doing it. Yeah, it would be very monotonous. Certainly this build had its own monotonous parts, like putting together all those spine cargo modules. It's a pain in the butt. I've now done that 3 times, and I don't want to do that anytime soon. But putting together the wiring in the interior, and then one of the hardest parts towards the end, and I outlined that in my last video, was getting that pod bay to fit in there comfortably with the cockpit. And I had to basically just have nothing whatsoever raised up above the ceiling top at all. So I ended up having to do in the front. I had to do the front lights so that they would not come into contact in any way, shape, or form. One other thing I did, which you really can't see it very well, is that since this top part is attached with magnets in the back, when you stick that on, the groove around here, there was always one little spot, or this spot, it just didn't want to come together just right, even when it fit. So I took some thin styrene strip and I glued it. There was an edge on the bottom that met, on the top, that met and went down inside of the bottom. So I just glued it around that, actually 2 of them because they were thin, and then I just sanded them so they were fairly flush. I put some tape around the sphere when it was apart, just leaving that strip exposed, and painted it. First I painted it with some darker gray, and then I went over it with my blending coat color so it would match in. So it matches in with the ship, and it just looks like part of that center stripping. But it made it come together so that there is no gap, which is really nice. And it just gave it just that ever so slightly little tiny bit that it fits really nicely together. Thanks a lot, George. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm real happy with it. I really love this ship. I love all the 2001 ships. They're just phenomenal, every single one of them. That was like one of my first experiences with model building back in the 70s. I didn't actually see the movie when it came out because I was only 7 years old. I was born in 61. So it came out in 68. I was too young to go see that. My parents wouldn't have taken me to see it. But I don't think I saw it till much later, probably sometime in the 70s when it came on television, because back then in the 70s, we didn't have VCRs. You didn't have digital movies. You didn't have DVDs or Blu-rays or anything like that. So if you didn't see it at the movie, you saw it on TV. And they didn't show it like 4 months later. You might have seen it a year or two later. I don't know what their rationale was back then for when they showed it on television, but they waited forever. But my first model that I got that really got me into it was the Spindrift from Land of the Giants, for the Aurora version, the first one. And I just fell in love with it. I loved the little people, the little interior. It just blew me away. The second major ship I got for Christmas in the early 70s, and it was the Moonbus from Aurora. And I'm glad I got that because they didn't make any more after that. They did some repops in like 1975 of the Spindrift and the Flying Sub and the Space Clipper and things like that. But they didn't redo. I heard that the molds got damaged in a train wreck or something. Excuse me. But they only made the one run. And so I got that one. And again, I just fell in love with it. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. That was one of my favorite all-time kits from back then. And then later in 1975, they re-released the Space Clipper, which I loved. And then once I saw the movie, I realized, oh, these are like bit players in the film. These aren't even the main thing. We didn't even see the Ares 1B in a model, or certainly the Discovery, which is amazing. But I would guess that the complexity of it and how long it is and that sort of thing, that Aurora decided not to make it into a kit back then. But yeah, I mean, ever since I saw the movie, I just fell in love with it. And I've seen that film way more times than I can possibly remember. But yeah, I'm definitely enthralled by all of the models and all of the things, as you can tell. And just the sheer realism of it. That back when they were making, still making flying saucers flying through space and, pointy cone-shaped rockets, that Kubrick, even before we landed on the moon in 69, Kubrick was making things that looked far more realistic and believable. I read a good part of it, Kevin. I didn't get into it as much because I was thinking it was about making the movie. And maybe later on it is, but the parts I read was just about Arthur C. Clarke talking to Kubrick and meeting with him and doing different things. And it was interesting, but I thought it was a book about, like, here's how the film was made, and I was thinking maybe there'd be pictures. I appreciate it. Thanks for sending it. At some point I'll finish reading it, but I'd like to there are some books by Piers Brizzoni, I think his name is. He's got some really incredible books. I think they're called like The Science of 2001, and they go over they have a ton of pictures, and they show the models, and they show how they were filming it and things like that. So I'd like to see something like that. That would be really cool. I wish that museum that's showing like the Ares 1B and like the redone Moonbus and those kind of things was near me. But it is not, so I can't go to see it. I did get to see 2001 at an IMAX theater. I don't think it was last year. Probably 2019. But they put it back in the theater. And I was able to see it in an IMAX. I wasn't able to see one of the 70 millimeter prints, which would have been cool with the crackling and stuff. That would be cool. But that was awesome to see it in a big giant IMAX again. Well, for the first time. So that was amazing. But definitely one of my all-time favorite films. For sure. And then there's my space clipper. There's my Frank astronaut that was 3D printed. Real happy with. Got my Invisible Man in black and white. My mini Spindrift, obviously paying homage to my first build, pretending I was building it on a desk. My Millennium Falcon escaping from Mos Eisley. And I got my Mando and Queel riding on their blurgs. There's the Mando from Bandai. I won first place for him. No, I'm just kidding. I did not. First place is for my thing, my original thing from another world that I scratch built pretty much all of. And then my remake of the thing from another world, being visited by the monster from the Tomorrow War. He decided to come in and pay a visit. Then I got my Ahsoka Tano and Mando. I have to say this is still my all-time favorite achievement. I really love this a lot, especially with the light-up lightsabers and the two figures. Yeah, that Bowman figure's pretty good. Why don't you try your hand at it, Kevin? You should get yourself a 3D printer, man. Get a 3D printer, I keep telling you. There's my Loki from the Loki series in Miss Minutes. And then I got Charge, which is a bust. It's supposed to be like a sexy version of the bride of Frankenstein. And then I got my Moonbuzz. This is also Stargazer. Really nicely done. Has a full interior. Lights up. Really awesome. Got my Mando. He's my very first 3D printed figure that I ever made. He's pretty inaccurate, but he looks pretty cool. Then I've got Grogu in his crib, which I bought from NY 3D Creations, I believe it was. Other one I 3D printed on the right. And then my Predator pod ship from Blackheart Models, which I also love. So, yeah, get yourself a 3D printer, Kevin. I mean, now that they keep releasing the newer ones and the bigger ones, you could get a 3D printer for like $190, like the Elegoo Mars. Start with that. You could print him on the Elegoo Mars. You would have no trouble doing it. Because most of his things, like his arms are separate, his trunk is one piece, his top of his chest is one piece, his legs are separate, his helmet and his head are separate, and also his oxygen tanks are separate. So, but by all means, get into that. I mean, that's a fantastic tool that gives you all kinds of options to do things. I mean, you could even print. He has a version of that same figure, but in the pose for the dead Frank, and it has the Frank head, and you could put him in the arms of the full-sized Mobius pod. Because the beauty of 3D printing is you can make them whatever size you want them to be. So hopefully that guy eventually comes up with a version of him. I think he's working on it. A version of him seated to go into the pod. I think he is actually. But that's one kit I don't know when I'll ever build it. It's just so big, and you have to do it upright. You'd have to buy. I bought a few aftermarket parts, but you'd have to buy a ton of things and really invest some money into building that giant pod that's literally bigger than my head. So. So I don't know. I own it, of course, but I don't know when I'm ever going to build it. And get that completed. I have started and I'm working on, well, I'm not working on, but I want to get back to working on my Borg Discovery, which I do have quite a bit done. So at some point I may return to that soon. Right now, other than the AT-ST build with Glue and Paper Guy, I don't have any plans because I'm waiting to see what's going to be coming up. The models I'm definitely excited about, obviously the Ares 1B, the larger Space Clipper, and also the Fly from Monarch. Is it Monarch? I think it's Monarch. That's going to be a fantastic kit. I mean, I've seen some things where they're talking about it. They're getting ready to start getting it going. So I would love to get that. That would go along with a lot of my other retro horror, like The Invisible Man and The Thing from Another World and things like that. But yeah, I do want to return to the Borg Discovery. Well, and again, like somebody mentioned earlier, you benefit from years of experience. So I'm a lot more skilled now, where I could go back to that and I could do it a lot more justice than I could back then. Just because, I become better at it. But it's pretty involved. I mean, it already has a ton of lights in it. I already have the pod bay completed with a ton of lights in it. I have a lot of the spheres scratch built and kit bashed. And I have the spine built, and I actually took the spine in half and put them together to make it like a double spine. And I made a bunch of lights for that as well and a bunch of pieces. So I may go back to that because I get a lot of requests for that. A lot of people want to see me finish that. And I do want to finish it. I really like the concept and the idea. But we'll see. A lot of times things change because suddenly something becomes available that wasn't available. I'm also excited to get the Razor Crest from round 2, the larger 172 scale one, and build that. That's going to be pretty awesome. So when that becomes available, I definitely want to get that one. Let me put this back in here. I'm not sure if I want to do any of the other Star Trek. I do a little bit of Star Trek. I love Star Trek, but I haven't built a lot of the ships, mainly because they kind of intimidate me. And again, it's like you got to understand that you're going to do a ton of work in order to get that to work, because all the Aztecing, all the lights, things like that, it's just a lot of involvement. So, all right, so here's the pod. So let's get and put that into the middle. And if it's not in frame, I'm sorry. But again, this goes in from the outside. So you just, you see it came on. Just line up those two rods, slide it in. That's it. Now it does extend further out in the center just because of the way it's designed. It's really hard to work with spheres, how they curve. It does stick out. If you stick it in the left side, you just want to barely stick it in until it makes contact and it holds, and then just do that. It'll stick out. But it's not quite as far out on the left side as it is on the middle. But that looks pretty sweet. And it literally will go inside the ship. I mean, I wouldn't push it all the way in. It's going to be a tight fit. But it would literally fit in the ship. Because the Shapeways ones from Falconware, he designed them with this kit in mind, that it will fit through those doors. And it will go in there. A lot of the other ones you can get, like some of the resin versions, they're just too big. Some of the other ones made on Shapeways also too big. They just won't fit. That was one of the hardest things too, is when I got the pod bay positioned in, I had to make sure that I married that balance between the top not making contact with the cockpit, but also that this would fit in. That this pod would fit in, and would fit in over here as well, because they're just slightly, ever so slightly off. If I had tried to do it, I would not have been able to get all three sides to match up and fit, just because it's just so hard with that geometry of the sphere. Spheres are a pain in the neck. They really are. They're hard to paint too, because being curved, you start airbrushing and spraying, and the part that's straight on goes on nice, but then the part further away kind of mists out, and you tend to it gets kind of powdery, and because I used Altamias on it. So definitely a challenge working on spheres. Plus, if you're putting any kind of masking on it, it's really hard to get it to go around a curve straight. Yet another reason to use the Aztec dummy mast set from Lou Del Masso, because he makes parts on there that have a curve already in it. So when you put it down on a curved surface, it makes a straight line, which is pretty amazing. So he put a lot of thought into that and really developed it so that it is perfect for this kit. So I definitely highly recommend. That's a nice shot. You can see those lights in the cockpit in the back. Close the pod bay doors, how? Just kidding. Somebody was asking in one of my Facebook posts, and I thought of the same thing. Basically, the whole pod bay is an airlock. They have a door in the Athena room that shuts, and they have a door in the airlock over to the right, and they have a door for the maintenance corridor. But the whole pod bay is an airlock, which doesn't seem too practical. And they were wondering, like, so every time they open the pod bay door, does it suck all the air out of the pod bay? And it's like somebody said, well, no, probably not. They have those big fan units up on the ceiling. So they probably, he gets in the pod and the other guy goes into the Athena room and they suck all the air out of the pod bay, then they open the door. But then you would think it would take a little bit of time to do that. Then when he comes back in, they got to suck all the air back out. So would have been a much smarter design to make some actual compartments where the pods come out and, you know, keep them separate. So kind of like what they did in 2010 for the Leonov. They have a separate, a whole separate thing that their little pods, which are pretty cool actually, they would go on a track out into the airlock part, close the door, open up the second door, and then they would fly off so they weren't wasting a lot of air. trying to keep that going. So let me just check my chat here. If I missed you saying something, I apologize. Yeah, airbrushing is definitely a game changer because you can paint any paint at all and put it onto things and make it look better and smoother. And two, I've become a lot more confident with doing some close-up airbrushing with minimal masking on some places. Because I just get closer and I learned how to adjust the pressure on it and things like that and just do some very, very fine effects with it. So yeah, I actually read the I don't know if I read the first 2001 book. I read his short story The Sentinel, which it was based off of. That's basically just astronauts finding something on the moon, and that's the whole story. But I definitely read 2010, the year we made contact. I read that whole book. And I really thought it was interesting. And one of the things that I noted on it, and I've mentioned to other people, because people always ask me, you know, are you going to light up the engines? And I said, well, no, because one, you don't see the engines lit up in the movie, because you don't. You only see them at the end of 2010. They do a little bit of animated effect, like it's firing its engines. But the idea in the book was that it didn't have any rocket fuel. It didn't burn rockets coming out of the back. It ran off of water. It had a nuclear propulsion unit that superheated the water to steam, and it propelled steam out of the back, and that's what propelled the ship. Because there's even a side story in the book where there was a Chinese ship called the CN or the TCIEN, something like that, and they were racing with the Leonov to get out to the Discovery because they wanted to go out and find its secrets and see what was going on, and the Leonov left before they did, but the Chinese ship actually caught up to them and passed them And they were like, how in the world did they do that? What kind of propulsion are they using? And it turned out that they expended all of their water fuel during the trip out there to go as fast as they could to get past them. And then they landed on Europa in order to break through the ice and suction up some more water fuel so they could refill the ship. Unfortunately, the lights on the ship and the activity awoke a big monster under the ice, and it broke through and crashed the ship, and everybody died. Which I always thought was interesting, because that's kind of the whole plot of the Europa Report, if you've ever seen that movie, which I like that movie. But that's basically what it's about. They land on Europa and some big giant monster comes up out of the ice to attack their ship. So I always thought that was funny, because they basically stole the whole plot from the 2010 book. But it's really a logical idea as far as the steam, because that's how nuclear power works. Nuclear power doesn't produce electricity. It doesn't produce energy. It doesn't do any of that. It produces heat. And so the way that any nuclear reactor works is that they let it get really hot and they run water pipes by it, which then superheat the steam, which run turbines, and that makes electricity. And that's how a nuclear submarine works. So a nuclear submarine does the same thing. It has a nuclear power unit, which superheats water, which runs the turbines, which runs the propellers, which also runs electricity and powers the ship. So it would make sense, and obviously Arthur C. Clarke, who was also a scientist, I believe, he knew his stuff, and he was obviously familiar with nuclear power and how it really functioned. And so he had the idea that that's how these ships would have been propelled. Some other people suggested that there would be like nuclear explosions behind the ship and then have a blast plate. And I mean, in a way, I guess, but that sounds terribly dangerous and destructive kind of thing to be doing. But yeah, that's one of those interesting facts that I've always read about, and I really liked that in the book that I read. So well, Kevin, I don't know if it took them that long. I don't think anybody was wanting to send it. When you see 2010 and they talk to Haywood Floyd, nobody wants to go back out there. In fact, no, actually, that's not true. They were working on Discovery 2. They were building it. So they were delayed in the time frame to get out there. But then the Russians had already built the Leonov and had it ready to go. So that's why they talked them into doing a joint mission, since obviously Floyd and the Americans would know how to reactivate Discovery and get it running again. So, but the real question is, when we see them on the moon and the monolith makes that sound, we then cut to the Discovery and it says 6 months later. So were they already building the Discovery before they went to the moon? Because it doesn't seem logical that they built the Discovery after they found the monolith and then launched it, and they were already 6 months out into space. So I would tend to think that maybe they were already building this thing for other purposes and just repurposed it. Because you would think it would take some time to build a ship like this up in space, for sure. But there she is, in all her glory. Now, Kevin, one thing to note, I've heard that some people mail models through the mail, and somehow miraculously the model turns into an older version of the build and it doesn't look as good quality. So if that happens, it's not my fault. I did send you the newer one. Just kidding. I will definitely send you the new, really good one. Like I said, I love my first one. I'm still happy with it. And I like it displayed up on the thing. And I was very happy to be able to rebuild it and really do it justice. Hi, Jello John. I'm glad you could make it. Yeah, the book definitely fleshes out a lot more. In fact, it really gives you a lot more insight into what's going on at the end of all that trippy stuff. Because I didn't understand any of that when I first watched the movie. Apparently, that room they put him in and all that, it was from the aliens, and they were attempting to create some familiar environment for him, because he was obviously terrified when he went through that wormhole and ended up there. But, you know, we never hear any of that. We never see any aliens. We never, you know, they never speak anything. But yeah, when you read the book, you get a lot more info about it. Like also, too, the whole idea, I think they were going to do more footage, but the when the Star Child comes to the Earth at the end, the first thing he does is destroy all the nuclear satellites surrounding the planet. He just wipes them all out. He's like, we're done with this. No war. No more battling each other. So, which is really interesting because that's kind of the whole theme throughout it. We start with the, you know, primordial man, and he doesn't know how to fend for himself, and the monolith comes in and teaches him how to make tools. So he learns how to use bones and other things to kill off his enemies or kill animals to eat them and that kind of thing. Throws the bone up into space, and then suddenly we see what's supposed to be an orbiting weapon platform. But again, unless you read the book or somebody points that out, you don't know that's what that's supposed to be. So the first ships they show up in space before we see the Space Clipper are supposed to be weapons. And so we go from, hey, how you doing, Benjamin? We go from the bone, which is a weapon, up into space, which is a far advanced weapon of man, because we've evolved to such a point that now we can destroy everything and everybody. The biggest interesting thing of all that I find that I think caused a lot of people to think that the movie's boring is that they spend little to no time building up the characters of any of the people in the film, because that's not the point. In fact, when we get to Discovery, Hal has a better personality, and we focus more on his personality than we do on Dave and Frank. Dave and Frank are just running through the motions. They're just doing their thing. In fact, the first time we see Frank, we see him running through the centrifuge, but then we see him laying on a table getting a tan, and obviously because of the time delay, he gets a message from his parents, and they're wishing him a happy birthday. And because obviously he's not doing a live conversation, he just sits there, doesn't say anything. He says nothing. He never speaks at all back to it. In fact, he doesn't send a return message to his parents. And it's interesting to note that at that point, Hal says, "Happy birthday, Frank." And he's like, "Thank you, Hal." So they're responding to Hal as a real person, and Hal has the most emotion in the whole film because he also is supposed to have been evolved. He's evolving into this sentience, or, you know, his other computers have evolved into this sentience to the point that he's evolving just like everything else. That's a theme through the whole movie. You know, early man in his ape form evolves, and then newer man evolves, and then machines evolve, so Hal's evolving. And then when Dave goes through the whatever, the wormhole or the black monolith, he comes out, and the aliens help him to evolve again to the next level. And we're never really told how long that's supposed to take or whatever. But yeah, he becomes a Star Child, so he evolves. That's kind of the big theme of the movie throughout it. But definitely a whole lot to think about. And that's the beauty of it, is that he didn't come out and just tell you, hey, this is what's happening, this is how it works, and this is what's going on. He just showed you a lot of really stunning images and realistic looking spacecraft, and just said, hey, make up your own mind. Figure out what's going on for yourself. So Kevin, the middle of 2010 is that him coming back. So obviously we're supposed to assume that Dave had transformed into the Star Child during this time frame, that, you know, that after he left Discovery, and they obviously then a few years later went out to find it again, because he appears to them and he appears in different forms, including the Star Child. Yeah, exactly. Is that he was, and that's interesting too, because yeah, and again, don't quote me. I don't know if there's other films that did it, but I'm not aware of ones where. So certainly before 2001, we had robots, we had androids, we had machines that can think and, you know, go rogue and stuff like that. It's not the first time they've done that, but I think that in Kubrick's, first he gave a character and a personality to Hal. He actually made Hal make decisions and think on his own and go against his commands, obviously. He killed most of the crew. And but he did it because he thought that's what he needed to do. He didn't fully understand. You know, he was learning to be something that thought, and he could think and make decisions, but at the same time, he didn't understand the concept of lying, and he didn't understand the concept. They brought a lot of that out in 2010, where they said he didn't know how to lie. You told him to lie, and he didn't know how to do that. And so he just did what he thought he could do. It's like, oh, these biological units are interfering with the mission, and I must make sure the mission complete. So I'm going to have to kill them. That's what he did. To him, it was just a logical thought. That's what you do. That's the next step. So definitely a very interesting film. But yeah, it's really interesting because so many iconic things from 2001 have bled into the popular culture. And so many films after that have copied certain elements of it or borrowed heavily from it and done things like that. So definitely one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. Definitely one of my favorites. So, which, God help the person who ever tries to reboot it, because that's just, no, you can't reboot that. You just couldn't. Nobody's ever tried. I mean, they did a sequel to it, but it was actually based on, the second book. But nobody's ever tried to go back and reboot it, because you're not going to do it. I mean, even today, the special effects hold up. They hold up even today with CGI and everything else. You still feel pulled into that film as though that's all real. They're really flying to the moon. They're really flying out in space. They're going to Jupiter. The scenes where he leaves out in the pod and goes out and changes the AE-35 unit. All very realistic. Very believable. So definitely an incredible film. All right, so then I can pull this out of here. And then I can put it in here. Get in there. Come on, you can do it. Get in there. Sorry. Got one in, one doesn't want to go in. Get in there. There we go. Sorry. There you go. And so you can see it's not quite here. It sticks out good. It's not quite as far as the other one, but like I said, just get it in, and just once it starts making contact inside the brass tube, just leave it in. So that looks cool as well. And then you have the the middle to do a better view of the pod bay. And there's Hal watching us. What do you think you're doing, Dave? Dave, you cannot have the middle door open and also the other door open. That's not safe. What are you doing? Do you have your helmet? Put your helmet on, Dave. You have to think, too, that Hal knew he didn't take his helmet. And he could have said, Dave, you need your helmet. But he knew, like, this was his plan. He's like, yes, leave the ship, Dave. Go out and rescue Frank. So I can lock you out and kill the rest of the crew. So he knew what he was doing. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. I like that look. But see, again, I mean, it's real simple. As you saw, I've done it twice now. While we were filming, I've taken it out and put it in. It's real easy to do. So that you could do with it on display and not worry about it. As far as putting the pod facing off, it's a little more involved because you got to take the top of the pod off. You got to stick this in, connect it to the wire, plug it into the side, put it back on. I mean, it's not terribly hard, but it isn't the kind of thing you're going to be doing on a regular basis. But certainly it's available to you. Yeah, definitely, I agree. It's kind of funny because a lot of the newer science fiction stuff are actually returning back to practical effects. Because, you know, as nice as CGI is, practical effects is just something different about it. It just has that real feel to it because it's a real model that you're actually looking at. So, thanks, Jello John. I appreciate it. Hey, what's your first name, Jello John? I hate to keep calling you that when you put your comments in. Is your name just John? Yeah, no matter how much they oh, thanks. I'll call you John from now on. I figured, but I didn't want to assume. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, don't be daunted by this kit. I mean, it's involved and it takes time. You don't have to necessarily put the same level of, you know, things into it that I did. The green strawberry kit, again, I would highly recommend. It's very good. It's very well done. If you're okay with just putting like a warm white in the maintenance corridor without any lights coming through separately, and if you're okay with not having, you know, the screens lit up in the Athena room, the rest of it is ready-made to go. The only other thing I had to modify was the ceiling lights because the ceiling is really thick. It's probably a good 2 or 3 millimeters thick, or possibly even, you know, something like 1/8 of an inch or something. So, and it was just flush on top. So you could see these really thick frames around the ceiling lights. So I just took a Dremel and I just grooved out the resin so I could get, you know, down to a thin edge on the windows rather than a really thick one. And then in the end, that helped me out because obviously I wouldn't have been able to put lights on top of that ceiling anyway. It just wouldn't have worked. There's no way that would have functioned. So you can see when you look at the lights, you're not seeing a really thick edge to them. But everything else is fantastic. I mean, it has the separate tanks that go in the back. The workbench was easy to use. Obviously, I modified their pod platforms because they had some really flimsy resin parts that connected it into the bottom, so I took that out and replaced it. But if you're not worried about, you know, lighting up the pot or anything, that would be an easy thing to do also. Now the doors I had to do with the Stargazer kit, so you'd have to do a little bit of surgery on the doors if you wanted to have them open and keep the bezels. And I actually did that in my first one. If you go back and look at that, it was fairly easy to take a pull saw and just run it along the edge all around the bezel until I cut it loose enough and broke it free and just glued it onto the kit. And then the doors were separate if I wanted to maybe cut them open and that kind of thing and put them in separate. So that was able to be done as well. So thanks, Tim. I pretty much exclusively use lights from Evan Designs. I really like them a lot. I hate soldering. I've done some of that on this because I kind of had to with the really tight spaces, but me and soldering don't get along very well. So they come pre-wired, which is great. And obviously I can get ones that are like, you know, I can get red ones and the cool white and the warm white. And then for the maintenance corridor, or for not the maintenance corridor, for the workbench, for that display that changes colors, and for the Athena room displays, I just use their standard color changing LEDs. They're not the SMDs, they're like the clear domed color changing ones, but they're really cool. So I just use one for the, and it's actually behind the workbench. It's literally sitting behind it, but you can't see behind it, of course. But I carved out the back of it and put it behind it. I have two behind the Athena room one so that they'll change out of sync randomly. So you'll get more of a look of 6 different displays changing colors. Now that was a solid resin piece and they just had like a sticker that went over it that had a picture of screens. So what I just did was cut out the whole back of it, put in my own stripping. Yeah, the color changing are also from Evan Designs. Those are pretty cool. For the color changing, I'm trying to think. It's probably like 2 millimeter or 3 millimeter. It's pretty small. It's not that big. And it comes pre-wired as well. So it just, and the nice thing about that is, like for the cockpit, I use fiber optics. So if you can see the cockpit lights there, let's see if I can get in close. Here we go. So what I did was I took 2 color changing bulbs and I put them into some styrene tube. And then I randomly ran fiber optics. Well, first I put the fiber optics into the controls. And then I had them in 2 separate strands. And so I just took a few from each one and just mixed them up and put them into the tubes so they would be random. So when one was changing to one color, one was changing to another, and they get out of sync pretty easily so that it looks like there's different controls that are blinking on and off. So yeah, Evan Design sells a whole bunch of stuff. You can get things like the wig-wag lights to turn from blue to red. You can get strings of lights. In fact, for the maintenance corridor, what I did was, since I needed lights all around it, I bought a set of stringed warm white. I think they weren't the chip. It was either chip or it was the nano SMDs, and there were 12 of them. So they were wired together in just one strand of wire. So all I did was just glue them down and keep wrapping it around until I wrapped it around the whole thing. And since there were 12, it gave me plenty of light to illuminate that. It's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but you can see the individual lines that you see going around the sides of it. And then I just use all 3 volts. The beauty of that is if you get them all the same voltage, you can get 9 volts from them and other voltages, but if you get all the same voltage, you don't have to worry about using resistors or anything like that. They're just all ready to go. And then the remote control sensor is from them. So I use those in quite a bit of my models, and it comes with remote control. And this is cool too. It has a dim and a bright feature. So if I want to make it dimmer, see if I can get in there. Here you go. Oops. This is a 1/44th scale from Mobius. And then you can make it brighter. Sorry. Okay. Now, the only thing I noticed is if you make it dimmer, if you get to a certain point, then the color changing bulbs just turn red and they don't keep changing colors. They must need more power to be able to work. But you can see that ceiling light in the hallway in the back. And again, like this tends to look like it's almost foggy, but it isn't that way in real life. In real life, you can see clearly back into the back hallway. You can see the back door. You can see the lights. You can make out the seats, of course. And you can make out Frank, who's sitting in the seat, the side lights, things like that. So and it doesn't look that blue in real life. Neither does the pod bay. The pod bay looks more of a cool white. The cockpit, you primarily see the cool white coming from the hallway. And if you look to the side, you see like a lighter blue, and it gives kind of a blue tinge. Yeah, definitely, because I don't have to hide a switch, or you don't have to take off the back every time you want to turn it on and get it going. Oh, no problem, Kevin. So I'll let you know how I'll let you know tomorrow how my first print of the monolith 2001 plaque comes out. And hopefully it works. And then I'll look into possibly getting it painted for you and putting some lights in it, and we'll see where we're going. Then really the only other thing I have to do is print out the brackets, which I'll just print those in gray. And that way you can paint them whatever color you want. But yeah, definitely we'll be in touch. And then we'll see how about getting this put together and packaged up and shipped out to you. Yeah, Vincent, this is the Mobius 144 Discovery. And I use the green strawberry pod bay, which is an aftermarket kit. And I also used another aftermarket kit from Stargazer, which is actually the full interior. Well, if you want, you just want to paint them flat black, Kevin. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so if you want to, like I said, I'm going to paint the bases. So I have the bases glued onto the rods. I'm just going to paint these all black. So I can do it all at the same time. That's fine. And then we'll do that. All right. Have a good evening, Kevin. Kevin is my client, by the way. He's the one I'm building this for. If you didn't figure that out from some of the things that he said. But I've known him for a couple of years. I've never met him, because he lives in California and I live in Indiana. But we've talked a lot, and we talked on some groups that we both belong to, devoted to the Discovery. And that's when he first saw my original one and really liked it, so he wanted to have me build a version for him as well. So definitely. And like I've told him, I mean, I really like building this, but I'm definitely glad for it to be done so I can move on to some other projects. As I mentioned earlier, some of you weren't here and might have missed it. The glue and paper guy who's in the chat, if he's still there, his name is Tim, and we're going to be doing a buddy build of the ATST from Star Wars. He builds paper models, and so he's building a paper version, and I'm building the Bandai version, the larger one. I'm not sure of the scale. And I'm going to make a little diorama with it and try to do some effects on it being blown up or that kind of thing. So that'll be our next, my next build. At some point here, we'll film an introductory video and we'll go over what we're going to do, and we'll both do like a Zoom call together and film that, and then we'll build it separately. He'll post his on his channel, I'll post my parts on my channel, and then we'll post a finale together of the final build for that. So I've never built the ATST. I've built lots of Star Wars, but I've never built that one. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I'm actually real happy. I'm actually more interested in the smaller scale Star Trek, like the recent Discovery that they brought out. I think it's 1000, the nicer one. So I bought that with the light kit. I got the shuttlecraft, the newer shuttlecraft, which is really nice. So I'm going to build that at some point. And I have some of the smaller scale, like the 12500s. I have like the 7 Enterprise kit, which is really cool. Someday build on those, but I have a large stash. I don't think I'm ever going to get to all of them. There's all my models up on some shelves. Sorry. So a lot of things to get to. I scared my little kitty who was hiding in a box. Hey, Mocha. Get back in your box. Didn't mean to wake you up. This is a big giant roll, a 4-foot by 8-foot roll of, I think it's .030 styrene sheet. I found a local provider down in Indianapolis that sells this in these big giant sizes. That was like $17, which is nothing. You buy those little, 4 inches by 6 inch sheets, you get maybe 2 or 3 of them, and you pay like $5 or $6, $7 for them at a hobby shop. So I'll be doing that from now on. I figured the .30 is pretty good standard size. It's not too thick, but easy to work with, so I can use that a lot to do models. So that was a nice investment. So yeah, me too, Jim. I had all of those. I was even thinking more recently about all the kits that I had, and it had to have been like in the 30s or 40s. It was unbelievable. I mean, you had all the Aurora kits, because I was born in '61, so by late 60s, early 70s, that's when I first got into building them. So I had the Aurora kits, which then they went back and did a repop. At that point, you had Star Trek, so AMT brought out a whole bunch of Star Trek. They had the Enterprise and the Klingon and the Spock shooting the dragon. You had the shuttlecraft, the Romulan ship. I mean, there was a lot, And then when Star Wars came out, that just went nuts. And MPC had a ton of Star Wars models. You had You had models from Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica, which of course I got all those. Space 99, obviously, as you said. So I definitely had the Eagle back then and the Hawk. And the Moonbase Alpha, I loved getting that. So yeah, this was ingrained in my head early on as a young child. And so right now we're in the golden age. Well, I wouldn't say golden age. Well, golden age or the renaissance of model building, because every kit that I built as a kid is now available again, and even better versions are available, and even more kits that were never available. So it's definitely mind-blowing to live nowadays as a modeler. And then you throw in 3D printing, and that just makes the whole thing, 10 times better, just because you can make anything that you want. I mentioned earlier, for some of those who came in later, Kevin had asked, I have a friend, Mark Fraley, who does modeling, and he has his own channel and does things. He's fantastic. And he's doing a lot of designing of his own 3D print stuff. And he made several plaques for me. Like, he made my Mandalorian plaque right here. He made this plaque for the Thing. He made this other Mandalorian. He made the one here for the Predator, which is really cool. So he asked about making one for 2001, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll give my hand at it. So I got together with Mark, and he gave me some pointers, and I'm just using Windows 3D Maker or Creator, whatever it's called. It's just from Windows. Pretty easy to use for basic stuff. So I designed a monolith shape, and at the top it just says 2001: A Space Odyssey. It has the How I, like it's just a dome with a ring around it, and underneath it then says the Discovery XD-1. Hey, kitty. And I'm printing it right now. It's on my Saturn, Elegoo Saturn printing right now. It's a 17-hour print. So I'm printing that in holo. And so that'll be my very first thing I've actually designed myself and then printed. And yeah, you're right, Tim. We didn't have the kind of lighting, which, again, it astounds me. I mean, if you understand what Kubrick went through to do all the things he did, it looks like something they could easily do today, like all the displays in the Discovery inside. He literally had mini projectors projecting those images onto just like a projection screen, backlit on all those monitors, running on all those monitors. Unbelievable. Like in the pod, on the ship. Today we have literal monitors that we could just plug into a computer and it would just do what we want, but he didn't have any of that. So he had to do it all by himself. When he made the centrifuge, one of the biggest problems he said they had is that the light bulbs kept breaking, and it was glass and it was dangerous, and they just couldn't keep them from breaking. And it was because this whole thing was, this big giant wooden thing was spinning around, and they were having the actor walk in the bottom of it and pretend like he was running around this thing that was rotating. So just unbelievable what he did in his time. But yeah, back then we were lucky if we could get, I don't even know if we could have got LED, any kind of regular LEDs, maybe from Radio Shack, but I was playing around a little bit where I would tear apart something else that had lights in it and try to use those. That's kind of what my homage is here to the Spindrift, where I have like a toy robot that I ripped off its arms and took out the lights, and I'm pretending like I was using them to wire up the Spindrift model, which I did. I don't think I ever did that, but I did similar things, and made a little homage to my first kit that I ever got, the Spindrift. So, but yeah, I mean, today is just a modeler's paradise that you can just do whatever you want pretty much. And if you get good enough, I keep working at designing 3D things. I can just start making my own things and not even have to worry about somebody else making it. So that's pretty cool. Hey, Jimmy. Is that Jimmy Eggery? It's Jimmy E. Jimmy's a friend of mine. He's my movie buddy. We have a AMC theater here, and we have what's called the A-List. It's $20 a month, and you can watch up to 3 movies a week. No extra cost. IMAX, regular, standard, anything. So we're loving it now that the movies are back and Marvel's putting all their great movies in the theaters. So we just saw Halloween Kills last Thursday. That was really cool. Yes, right. He's my coworker. I recently got him hired on where I work. I work for the largest healthcare provider in Indiana. So I don't know if I'll name them on here, but you could figure it out easy enough. So we work for the local hospital here. And he just did his first week last week, so he's real happy with that. Happy I finally got him hired on. It's a real good company to work for. They really pay well and take good care of us, so that's really awesome. Yeah, tomorrow we're going to see Dune. Really excited. No, not tomorrow. Today's Wednesday. I'm so confused. Friday we're going to see Dune. We're real excited about that. That looks really good. It's looks like a really awesome remake of that classic film. So that looks exciting. Yeah, you're right, Tim. In fact, he invented special effects that people from that film, like Doug Trumbull, Dykstra, I believe, went on to use in other films after that. Like Trumbull made several films. Dykstra, I believe, was working on like Space 1999 and other ones like that. I'm not exactly sure. I know there was other ones like Derek Meddings or something. I can't quite remember, but yeah, they had to come up with things. So he said, to his people, "Hey, I want to do this effect," and they were like, "We can't do that." He's like, "Yeah, we can," and they were like, "Okay." So they just figured it out and made it happen. And then after that, other people, Silent Running, Trumbull did that, yeah. Then they took those effects and went on and went to other places with it. So, yeah, definitely really quite a bit came from this film and moved on from it. So, well, this worked out pretty good. This is a better live stream than my last one. I think I got a better approach to keep it steady. And I even have I bought a steady cam. It's a cheap one. It was like $40 or $30 from Amazon. I bought a more expensive one, but the damn thing wouldn't work right. So I was like, forget it, and I sent it back. This one isn't too bad. It has a little remote control. You put it in. It just keeps it stable in one direction. It doesn't do 360 degrees. But I tried that, and it still wasn't as good. So I literally just have it on a tripod, and I'm just holding the tripod further down so it's a little more stabilized than me just holding my iPhone and filming that way. And it's certainly far easier than me using my laptop and trying to use the detachable camera from it and doing that. So this is a better way to go. So I might do this more in the future probably. And like I said, what I'm going to do, this will be posted on my channel, but I'm going to post a shorter video probably tomorrow night where I will go and have some beauty shots of the ship, some more video of it that I'll put into a little slideshow and do things like that. So I'll present it as the final video. Probably also, if I'm successful in printing that monolith plaque for Kevin, then I want to show that as well and kind of explain that that's my first 3D design that I made myself hand printed. So it's pretty cool. All right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. I appreciate it. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Marlar X. This This model I'm not keeping. This is a commission that's going to Kevin Newman, who was also in the chat earlier. But my version that I built 3 years ago goes up on this. Yeah, and thanks. That's how I like that display too, where I have the, all I did was went on to Google and got some space images. In this case, I got an image of the Earth and the space station and just put those into like a Photoshop and put them on myself. And then this one up here, I got some images of Jupiter and their moons. I made Jupiter far away because it's the idea that they're going towards Jupiter. So right now they're just closer to the moons. And then all I did was I had a local print shop print them out for me because they're larger. And I just got some cheap frames at Hobby Lobby. That's where I got the frames around it. I took the clear plastic out. There is some thin like particle board behind it, which I attached to the wall. And then I just put the pictures in and put the frame around it to hold it in place. And of course I've got the Mobius Howe model in the middle, watching over the ship. So I thought that was kind of cool. I have the, let's see if the battery's on. That battery must be dead, but it lights up because it's the model does. But yeah, I like that. That's my 2001 wall. And then that's my 3D printed Dave Bowman figure, which is pretty cool. And I got my plaque that I mentioned earlier, my zero gravity toilet plaque that the glue and paper guy, his name's Tim, he sent it to me. He's gonna be doing the buddy build with me of the ATST here coming up from Star Wars. All right, thanks a lot, Tim. Yep, stay tuned. Definitely a lot more good stuff coming. Appreciate everybody coming in for the live stream. And yeah, looks like we're a little bit over 2 hours. Time flies when you're having fun. So, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody showing up here, everybody coming in. If you missed earlier parts of the stream, it's going to be on my channel, of course, so you can go back and watch it. Just kind of skim through. Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, I think it is better. Probably because my iPhone back camera is a better quality than what I was using on my laptop. So it looks pretty good. I did a couple of tests yesterday, and yeah, you too, Jello. You too, John. Sorry, I keep calling you Jello John. One of my regular subscribers. But yeah, this works good. I think it's a good image. And then what I'm doing is I have my iPad that it's probably going to show double images. I have my iPad mini, and I'm just watching the chat. Oh no, it's going on forever. So I can see that. The chat, one at a time, the chat pops up on my phone, but then it disappears, it runs again, and I don't see the past chats. But this is a nice way to do it, so I can read what everybody's saying and go back and look at it. So, all right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I mean, this is why I do YouTube in the first place, because I really like to share with other modelers and give you guys ideas. I mean, certainly feel free to use any of the ideas I have or look at my older videos and see how I did certain things. Or if you have any questions, send me a chat, send me a message on my videos, and I'll be glad to answer it and show you how I do what I do. And I do the same thing. I definitely get a lot of ideas from other people's videos that I watch faithfully. And I really pick up some of their techniques and figure out how to do it. So it's definitely enjoyable. And I like doing the filming part and putting it up on YouTube. So thanks a lot, Eric. I appreciate it. So yeah, so look, tomorrow I should probably have my shorter video up showing the beauty shots of the ship. And I have a lot of photos I've already taken. And then I'll be able to do a short video with that and wrap up this build. And then look in the near future.